All right, guys, thanks so much for coming out to our second interview. Today we have Jason Hines, which, Jason, I'm not even sure if I actually even know your official title. I call you the Master Builder because that's pretty much all I kind of know you as. But what is your official title at this?
The official title is the Resident Puppet Builder.
Resident Puppet Builder.
Yeah,
okay.
Because there were years and years and years where they would just hire the puppet builder show by show, and then way back in the 90s, they're like, no, we need someone here full time, and that position was created and it's still called Resident Puppet Builder.
And are you the kind of the first to be that?
Oh
No. Okay, so
Uh,
you weren't the first permanent, but you came in after someone else. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Interesting. So let's go back a little bit. So how did you get started in puppetry? Was it something that you kind of grew up on as a kid, or were you just kind of a kid that would always kind of take things apart and see how to put it back together?
Yeah.
And if that is your initial steps into puppetry, how did you eventually go into puppetry?
That's a multi-step question.
Yeah.
I was the kid that took everything apart and then attempted to put it back together, and when it wouldn't go back together, hide it.
Well, okay, you got why'd you hide it?
Because you take your parents' microwave apart.
Oh, okay.
And then you can't put it back together. You just hide it. Like, where'd the microwave go? I have no idea. But there weren't really like many performing arts opportunities where I came from, a small town in North Carolina, and like I didn't even really understand that was like a job that anyone could do. But I was doing all kinds of things. I was in bands. I was really into skateboarding, like seriously into skateboarding. And eventually I went to college and discovered that there was a thing called theater. And I was well into earning an English degree at that point. I took a intro to puppetry class, and it was all downhill from there.
And
Jason, I just have a question. So
Yeah.
Did you start at UConn?
No.
Or did you start in a different school? Okay.
This was in Charlotte. I went to University of North Carolina at Charlotte because the largest skate park in the Southeast was in Charlotte. And between me getting accepted there and starting, it closed down. So I had to find something else to do. There was a bookstore I worked at the time called Media Play, which hasn't existed for quite some time, but they had a children's department, and I don't know who, but someone just had the idea to have like a puppet show every Saturday morning. So I just said, I'll do it. But I didn't realize that you could do the same puppet show every week or just have 2 or 3. So for about a year, I built a new puppet show every Saturday. I didn't understand that's not how it worked.
So were you mainly just taking classic children's stories, or were these all your own stories that you were coming up with?
Sometimes there were like spoofs of it. Like the Fractured Fairy Tales model. A lot of times I would just have an idea for a puppet that I wanted to build, and I would stay up all night the night before and make it, and then here it is, and I would just have to come up with a bit for this puppet to do, like on the spot. I didn't really understand how shows were put together, things like script and rehearsal, things like that. I didn't know that yet.
And was this still in Charlotte?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if anyone was at Media Play on a Saturday morning around 1993, I'm sorry.
And so you were probably what, 18, 19?
Yeah.
Around that time. So you, I assume, got your degree in Charlotte in what?
English and theater, a double major, because I was almost finished with English when I discovered that there was a thing called theater. So I spent an extra year there in double major.
And then someone advised you to go to UConn, or did you find that out on your own?
I found it on my own. I spent about a year in between doing all kinds of theater jobs. I was a technical director at a small community theater, and I did summer stock shows every summer. You know, like the big musicals, Anything Goes. You know, all the big shows. Big
Sure.
River, Showboat, South Pacific.
Yeah,
But
and I guess that just kind of helped you kind of figure out how theater was
how
made
theater
up.
works.
Yeah, how theater works, and yeah, that's a great education. I mean, that's the
Yeah.
best way to do it. Is just kind of plopped into it and be like, okay, so this is kind of how you do this. I mean, you really get a feel for it. I mean, that was true for me with acting in a lot of ways as well. Is you just kind of get plopped into it, and then you start realizing how everything works, and you're like, oh, you know what? Maybe I can try my hand at doing this part of it or that part of it.
And there were some fun things that I found in Charlotte, like Grace and Puppets. Used to be from there. I think they've moved away since. So I got to see, you know, how a puppet company worked, and I met Hobie Ford along the way when I was very, very young.
Wow.
So that was fun. And I did get to see some like weird fringy theater. And once I started seeing things like that, then I was just like, okay, yes, that's it.
That's where I belong.
Yeah, I saw a show called Vampire Lesbians from Sodom, which was just rock and roll, blood, great. So, yes, I am. This is it for me. I'm doing that kind of thing.
And so when you go to UConn, are you specifically going for puppetry, or is it theater in general, and then it just kind of curtails closer into puppetry? Or
oh no, I went for puppets. I mean,
you did go for puppets.
Yeah,
Okay.
that was kind of the big decision of like, I think I can do this for a living. So I went to UConn for grad school. I know it seemed quite rash.
I mean, that's such a big step, and I'm so fascinated by people who can make those decisions for themselves, because I've never been able to be that kind of person. You know, even with a supportive family behind me who would say, "Oh, you should go ahead and try this out," my rational mind would kind of take over and just be like, "No, I need to be able to put food on the table." Like the idea of actually making a living in theater in any way was just so over my head that I was like, well, there's no way I can make money doing this. So I'll always just have a job over here, and then my life in the theater will be on this side, and just kind of always keep them separated instead of trying to join them. So have you always been that kind of self-starter, that you had that confidence in yourself?
I mean, well, I was making a living doing theater. I was doing props and costumes and things. So I was already doing that. Like, I guess I just had the naivete of youth of like, I can make a living doing puppetry. Sure. I'm doing puppet shows all the time. You know, it's just, it didn't seem that unreasonable until I left grad school and moved to New York.
Okay, so let's go there next. So we're finishing grad school, and then so you go to New York first. Okay.
Yeah, because it's you know, Connecticut Theater, New York's right there.
Yeah.
Everyone from UConn theater department went to New York. That's just where real theater happens.
Right. True. And are you doing just backstage stuff in New York for a while, or are you able to find puppetry gigs?
I worked on a couple of big puppet jobs in shops. I built like big mascot characters for things like Pokemon Live was one of the big things, which is kind of it's kind of fun to think back, because they were squeezing like the last bit of money out of that franchise then. They thought this live show is going to be the last thing Pokemon ever does, and it's going to disappear. So let's make money off of it now.
Right.
Yeah, and that was over 20 years ago. But yeah, I worked on that. I worked on a TV show called Between the Lions, which I was just a puppet wrangler for, and I did an independent film. My friends and I self-produced 3 really good shows at this tiny theater on the Lower West Side that nobody saw.
Yeah.
Yeah, nobody saw. I think the grand total of 2 strangers walked in and saw the shows, and I paid tickets. So,
Yeah.
And after
So-
about a year of that, I was, literally starving, so I had to leave.
Gotcha. And so does this actually get you to Georgia to come to the center at this point? Or are you kind of reaching out saying, hey, are there any openings for puppeteers out there?
Well, at that point, I hadn't really done like real puppets for a while. I really thought that, I'd been building and I'd been wrangling and stuff, but I hadn't really gotten a chance to be a puppeteer on anything. It was very, very difficult to get your foot in that door in New York. So I left the city and just basically freelanced for a while until I was working at a hardware store in Connecticut when someone called here and called me from there. Hey, we need a puppet builder. Do you have a resume? Like, sure do. Well, a friend of mine from grad school had been the puppet builder for 3 years, and when she was leaving, she was like, "Call this guy. Probably good."
Wow. So they actually called you.
Yeah.
And I assume this tells you how out of touch I am. I've lived in Georgia all my life, and I had not heard of the Center of Puppetry Arts until I came there for the first time in 2001 to see an XPT show.
Right.
So I assume you had already probably heard about the Center of Puppetry Arts at this time.
I had I think the first show I saw here was The Jungle Book on the main stage. It was a marionette version of that. And the museum had just opened, like the old museum, the Power of Wonder, which was just amazing. It was just awe-inspiring. And then while we were here, someone told me about XPT, and I thought that sounds great, but I live in Charlotte. That'd be very difficult to do. But they also gave me a tour backstage, and I met Chris Brown, who was a puppet builder at the time, and he was building puppets for John Ludwig's Frankenstein. So I came back to see that.
Yeah.
Which was mind-blowing show. It's great.
When was your first XPT? Was it after you got the job, or did you actually do one before?
No, that was after I moved here.
Okay.
But they were, I first found out about it, and I guess it would have been 95, 96.
Right.
Yeah, but I lived in Charlotte then, so that would have been just 2 months to drive down.
Right. True.
Indeed.
So jumping ahead quite a bit. So your first show where you're actually a co-director on was the Leonardo da Vinci show. Is that correct? Was that your first official show with the center?
Yeah, Avanti da Vinci.
Yeah. Which was a fantastic show. And you originally, that was originally your idea that Ludwig kind of came on to it.
Yeah.
To kind of help direct it and whatnot, and oversee what was happening and stuff.
Well, we really collaborated on the script because I had a silly idea, but no, there was no like script or plot or anything. I basically really just wanted to do Batman, but to get around, the law, the legal system. What if we did Da Vinci, but it's really Batman?
Right. Yeah, I wanted to get to that because I remember you saying something about the fact that it was kind of comic book based. So that really kind of was. So was there any interest in Leonardo da Vinci?
Oh, yeah,
as a
absolutely.
topic from the beginning? Okay, there was.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, I mean, as I was trying to learn to draw and stuff, he was always one of my favorite, like, old world artists to try to copy. Just such an amazing draftsman, and I just love the cross hatching and all the crazy inventions that he drew. Yeah, so that was already sort of in my head, but I did an absurd amount of research for that show. Or I tend to accidentally pick subjects where there's a lot of books written. And I
Right.
feel the need to read all of them. It's difficult. Yeah, Da Vinci's been written about a lot.
Sure, sure. And does your process usually start kind of with research, or is it just a germ of an idea, or do you go to paper and start drawing some things out? Like how do you normally start when you're kind of starting a piece for yourself?
Uh, all of that kind of. I mean, it usually just starts with a harebrained idea, and sometimes I'll have visuals in mind. Sometimes I won't. If it's a short piece, I'll usually just make stuff up. But for longer pieces, I really have gotten into doing research. I just love doing it. I love reading and studying history, and I've just really gotten into it.
And was that something that you kind of found while creating your own shows, or had you always kind of been that way throughout school?
No, it was all about. It's all been through puppetry, really, and doing theater. I mean, I don't. Younger me would never believe that I would be talking about love of research and history.
Right. And you guys were able to tour that show around quite a bit, right? Like, where did you guys go with that?
Da Vinci, no, we actually we did 2 runs of it here, and we took it to a festival in Slovakia.
Slovakia, that's right. Okay.
Yeah, which those are the only places it ever went. But that was a massive undertaking and an incredible experience. That show was enormous and really not meant to tour, but we did it.
Yeah. For the people who didn't get to see that show, who might be on this call right now, can you kind of describe the huge facade that you had? That probably made such a pain to carry around.
Yeah, it was a massive. Basically, it was kind of like toy theater, but there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 windows, like upper windows, lower windows, and then a space in the middle where we did rod puppets and check black, and then there was a shadow screen up top. There was this massive wall that just filled the downstairs theater, and I mean, I've had people tell me that, like, as they were watching the show, just stuff just kept coming at you. There's more stuff, more stuff. Wait a second, there'll be more stuff. So
Yeah.
getting that all able to be shipped, or not air freighted to Slovakia, set up, formed, broken down, and then air freighted back. It was a massive undertaking.
And how was it received over there? What were the audiences like?
It was generally well accepted. We had a translator who was with us the whole time we were there, and like when she came back after the show, and she was all smiles, and I think her exact quote was like, "That was actually really fun." It was really weird doing it because they had a simultaneous translation, like, in their ears. So we would tell a joke, and then it would be translated to them, and then they would laugh. So it was very odd. Blah 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 blah. Yeah.
Yeah, for a puppeteer doing that show, it must have been weird to kind of get used to that. Wait for that extra second. Like, normally you know when to wait for a laugh after doing a show for a while, but
Yeah.
now having to put those extra 2 seconds in, or whatever it is, to wait before you continue.
And then get a laugh, or not. Yeah, it was
Right.
odd. But I think the real thing was, like, we were also loopy because we told them it would take 24 hours to set up, 24 hours, and then like 12 hours to break down. And we just expected that there would be a break in between those, but there wasn't. We We started setting it up. We spent 24 hours setting it up. We did a tech run, did the show, and then we spent 12 hours breaking it down. And then we were done. Yeah. So we were all just bonkers out of our mind. Anyway.
Wow. So was it just that one show? That
Yeah.
one showing? Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. And were you guys allowed to spend any time there at all, or is it kind
Oh,
of?
we got to see
get-
the rest of the festival. There was a whole festival.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And there was some
Okay, gotcha.
amazing shows, like from all over the world. I think we were the only one that was in English, and then none of them were translated, but still saw some like things I'll always remember.
And how was that, seeing these other shows from around the world? I'm sure they're gorgeous to look at, but not knowing the language and whatnot.
Well, a lot of them you could follow. Like there was this great version of The Fisherman and His Wife, the magic fish that makes wishes, but it was from Russia, and it was massive. It was huge. It was hilarious. They must have had like 35 puppeteers in that piece. Took up
Wow.
the whole stage of an opera house. There was also this really ridiculous Czech show called Rocky 9, because at the time, 9 sequels to the movie Rocky seemed absurd. I think we're actually there now. But if you knew that they were making fun of Rocky and Adrian and Apollo,
Yeah, that's all I needed.
that's all you need to know. And they were hardcore making fun of America. So
Oh, that's great.
it's hilarious. And there were some shows that were just completely baffling. We would just watch and be like,
Right.
Yeah.
So this show that you're working on now, this is what's the working title? Edison versus Tesla?
Tesla versus Edison.
Oh, okay. Tesla comes first.
Yeah, 'cause
Yeah.
I think Edison's more well established.
Right.
Tesla fighting the establishment, I think.
And so is this idea for this show, does this come about kind of the same way as Da Vinci, or how did this one come about? Let me also say, I find it very interesting that someone who liked to tinker as a small boy and hide away the stuff that he was tinkering on has gone to Leonardo da Vinci and now to Tesla.
Yeah, it seems like typecasting, doesn't it?
Yeah, right.
Let's see. I think the original genesis of this was just writing down. We were always planning like shows for the future and what's going to happen next season or 2 or 3 seasons from now. And I just kind of have an ongoing list of ideas of what I think would be a fun show. And we were actually kind of deep into working on an adaptation of Dracula when everything got shut down because of the pandemic. And my adaptation of Dracula was kind of that vampirism was like a disease that was being spread everywhere and infecting the world. And we're like, I think now's the time to do that.
Right.
So we went back to the list of show ideas, like, how about Tesla versus Edison? Like, okay, great. The grant proposal's due next week. All right, let's do it. So I had only the loosest idea of what it was. It started back then. That was like 2 years ago. So.
Okay, so basically you just had kind of the germ of the idea, and now once you got the grant, it's like, okay, now I got to do my research. Now I got to figure out what this really is about.
Yeah. I mean, I had a pretty good sense of who Tesla was, just because I like to read stuff. I built a Tesla coil when I was in junior high school for the science fair. I read a few books about him just along the way. What I was really surprised about was like how deep I got into the Edison research. Like Edison's life was just amazing. I think he's kind of become a more obscure figure now than, I'm not really sure why.
Sure. I mean, once you get David Bowie playing you, you're kind of on the cool kids list at that point, right?
Yeah. I think it's because he's such an established figure, and when people started rediscovering Tesla, and the things that he didn't get credit for, everybody kind of turned against Edison. It's like, forget him. The hip guy, go for him.
Right.
But Edison's life was just amazing. And there are lots of books written about him.
Lots of books, definitely. So when you start the process of developing a play, so this one's actually, you are writing it solely, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, and this one is also you directing it solely, is that also correct? Okay. So how do you go through the process of, here's my drum of idea, okay, I have the money. I think you can see where I'm kind of going with this curtails so well into XPT. I have an idea, someone's giving me some money to do it. How do you then focus on, okay, what kind of puppetry am I going to do on this? How do I start building up the script, and so forth from there?
Well, I have a bunch of puppets that I've been working with, and a lot of different ideas that have just been floating around for a while that just never had a place to land. So I kind of had a sense of the kind of show that I wanted to see. And then as far as like, I don't know if I can show you the cork board of Post-it notes. That's a whole bunch of stuff that I wanted in the show. And then down here, stuff that didn't fit in the show. Yeah, developing the script was difficult. The workshop was actually an amazing experience, because I can't tell you how much the script developed over those few weeks. Like every scene we got to, we would read through it, act it out, and then I'd say, okay, the next time we do it, it's not going to be anything like that.
Right. And
everything got rewritten.
I assume that's because it's so different when you're isolated and you're kind of typing up the script and everything sounds correct to you. But once you have puppeteers / actors working on what you've written, you can start seeing the mistakes or things that don't fit and stuff like that. And you go like, oh, okay, no, I can do this better.
Yeah. Also, a lot of it was like I'd done so much research. I was really in love with it. Like I was really in love with a lot of the truth and the facts.
Yeah.
And when we got up there and I got like just really fun performers, they didn't know any of this stuff. So they started making scenes out of things and was able to trim away a lot of the stuff and make a show out of it. And sort of like, it doesn't really matter. Nobody really knows that Thomas Edison was a bad public speaker,
Right.
and would never give a presentation on his own. I've got a great actor here who's doing a great job giving a presentation as Thomas Edison. It's a better show.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I know like a lot of criticism that especially movies have about them, especially when they're doing something that's historic, is the fact that, oh, that's not accurate. It didn't happen like that. They're taking too many liberties and stuff like that. But as you're finding out through your own process, sometimes you just have to let go of that, even though you spent countless hours researching and finding the truth, just because it's really not that entertaining.
It's not. And also, the show would be, it would be like Game of Thrones. It would be 17 hours long, and there are lots of details that no one would care about. Like, I realized once we got into it and started performing, it became a lot more about the characters and their interaction, and a lot of what I was tied to was the history and the science. And once I started hearing like all of the science jargon being spoken, I was just like, no one cares what a commutator is. No one cares what the frequency of the generator output was. I think it's fascinating.
Yeah.
But no one wants to sit and hear a discussion of whether 300 cycles per second or 60 cycles per second is better.
But that's got to be really difficult to kind of divorce yourself from that, because you talking about, I can tell how interested you are in it. So it's got to be hard to say, for the betterment of the piece, I need to cut this stuff out, even though maybe that's the stuff that really interests me originally about the play, or about doing this piece.
Well, I also knew that at some point I wanted them to get into a physical altercation that was completely not based in history at all. Like I really
Right.
wanted them to have like a big fight scene at the end,
Okay.
which is not based on it. It never happened. So,
Right.
if anyone sees the show and sees them get into a lightsaber battle and thinks that's not the way it really happened,
Wait a minute, really?
you've missed the point of the whole exercise. So it wasn't real, like I was never really going for a straight up historical reenactment to begin with, but I did like, let me grab something. Right when we were going into the workshop, I just found out that this 3-volume journal from one of Edison's assistants was available. This was written in the 30s and goes into a lot of detail of like just what day-to-day life was like. And there's details and diagrams and schematics of all the machines. And as soon as I got this, this was when I was realizing I've got to cut all the science out of the show. No one cares about this. It's fun to research, and I love that I did it, but like,
Right.
very little of that's going to be in the show.
So in working on the puppets for the show, what are there any new puppet inventions that you have come across, new techniques that you're using for the show that you haven't used before?
There's a really cool head mechanism that I've been working on for a while that it doesn't just turn and nod. You can actually go which, as I was working on it in the shop, it's one of those things where I realized that as I was working on it, I was making the puppet do what I was doing as I was working on it. So that's interesting. I've been working on with a lot of 3D printing, which is new to me, and being able to make things that I just couldn't be able to make any other way. Like the articulated hands is something I've been trying to put in a puppet show for years, but I just had no way of actually building.
Yeah, I got to see that preview, and I love the legs, the look of them. I mean, just gorgeous.
The leg, that was kind of a reaction to a show that we just did. I'm really tired of watching puppeteers crawl around on the floor. So I was trying to figure out a way of making like articulated legs that they wouldn't have to be on their hands and knees crawling around. So yeah, that's kind of where that comes from.
Yeah. What about any of the Tesla inventions or anything else? Have you been working on trying to recreate any of those?
Well, the very first thing that I made before I had any idea what the show was going to be, when I had just proposed it as building a Tesla coil, it actually works. We were not able to use it in the presentation because it does generate high voltage arcs of electricity, and due to some safety concerns, we were just like, there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
When we have an actual set and all these things, we can work this out. But for now, I'm just gonna skip it.
Wow, that sounds amazing. I mean, how do you see that working in the show? Is it going to be that something that kind of hovers over the scene and eventually it gets turned on and we get to see it happen, or is it a much smaller scale?
No, it's pretty big. Let's see if I can turn it around.
Oh,
right
wow.
there it is.
Yeah.
So it throws some pretty big sparks of lightning, but it's definitely like a climax moment. once you start shooting bolts of lightning just dramatically, there's really nowhere you can go from there. So it's definitely like a big climactic thing that'll have to be near the end.
And you said you had created one of these before in high school, right?
Junior high, it was a much
Junior
smaller
high.
one. Yeah.
Right.
And I didn't
So-
win the science fair.
Okay. Well,
So maybe this is a bit of retribution.
right. We're
Take
always
that, Mrs. Caskell.
we're always trying to rewrite our past.
I guess so.
Did you kind of use kind of the same idea from when you did it in junior high, or were you able to advance it a lot further this time, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
Much more.
Yeah. And how did you learn how to even do that? I mean, I think most people will be like, I don't even know where to start. Was it just watching YouTube videos? Did you read about it?
Well, I realized for this one that I needed, I mean, I had to learn how to do it and how it worked, but I also realized that I didn't have time to start from scratch. So I basically went to like a person that supplies kits and
Okay.
talked to him about what would be the size and shape. And there was still a lot to do and a lot to buy here, but like he was able to supply so much information. And like he said he's made around 5,000 of these. So I was like, yes, it will work. I can't spend months doing this and not have it function. So
Yeah, definitely.
and there are actually quite a few things in the workshop that were like that. It was like, we don't have time to spend on this right now. Just make a cardboard thing, and I know it'll work when we do the real show. But there
Yeah.
was a lot of that.
So what is the feature of the show right now? Like, where are you at right now? We know that you had your first viewing, and that was maybe 60-70% of it done, or it's a little
Well,
bit further than that.
it's difficult to quantify like that because all of that was for just developing the script and the ideas. Like
Mhm.
all of the puppets and all of the mock-ups that you saw were just mock-ups. So I don't think much of that is actually going to be in the
Right.
real show. So
I guess
think-
what I was saying is, obviously I didn't when we saw the preview of it, it didn't take us all the way to the end of the script. Like,
right, we had to
yeah,
jump a few things. Yeah.
right.
But we did work through the whole show. Like with the cast, we went scene by scene all the way through the show and developed the script. And then the last week we were like, okay, we have to do a presentation. What can we present and run straight through as a show? Because there are lots of things that were just like I said, we don't have a real set. We can't really do all of this. But we're like, we can run this first chunk. That's solid. That will work. And that kind of tells a good part of the story. And then we had to start skipping around.
Right. So how far out are you guys out possibly to, or I guess when is the date that it's supposed to be performed?
It will be next February.
That's February.
It
Wow.
will be, not less than a year from now.
Yeah.
So
Crazy.
after the workshop, I decided it would be good to just take a little bit of a break, get some distance from it,
Yeah.
and then jump in and start designing and stuff. I kind of, like I said, I was really proud of the script that we came up with, but want to let it sit for like a month and then go back and read it and be like, oh, it's terrible. This is crap. What was I thinking?
Well, I want to thank you so much for your time for this interview. If you're okay with it, I would love to open it up to everyone else to ask questions, either about you personally and about you coming into puppetry and working for the Center of Puppetry Arts. But also, if you're okay with it, if they have possibly any questions of things they're running into as they're building their own shows.
Sure.
That's okay. Yeah, great. Thank
Absolutely.
you. Does anybody have any questions? Jason?
Can't hear you.
I have a question.
Okay.
Jason, I saw the workshop, which I'm so excited about it. I really am. But I was wondering, when you were saying you had these kind of ideas, like, do you have ideas that are over here? Like, I would love to see a flying puppet. And then you go, oh, wouldn't it be interesting if we put, Eddie on the big legs? Like, I'm just kind of wondering how those two things come together, if there is a way they come together.
Well, that a lot of that was a combination of having things that I knew and I knew how to do, and I know this is going to be in the show, and then other bits of like I'm open to ideas. I mean, that workshop process was all about experimenting and trying lots of different things. Once we got about 3/4 of the way through the script, I realized that what I'd written from there to the end just was not going to work with the puppets that we had. After spending a few weeks working with the puppets, knowing what we were going to go for, I was like, well, I'm going to throw all this away. What can we do with the puppets we have? And that's how we came up with a lot of those ideas.
Well, it must be difficult to when you've been working on something, or maybe it's not difficult for you just because you're so used to the process and having to retry new things. But I know that for myself and other people who are maybe working on their first show or second show like that, it's hard to make that kind of pivot. It's not easy after you kind of spend some time on something.
Well, that's part of why doing this workshop was so great, is that I knew that this wasn't the final show. And I know that it's different when you're doing something for your first time, but the entire point of doing that's why everything was cardboard. We spent a lot of time building things that never got used because, and I knew that was a potential. And a lot of times when I was building things in the shop, I always kept that in my mind of like, don't spend too much time on this. Don't work too hard on this. There's a good chance we'll use it once and realize it wasn't the right thing, and just be willing to throw it away.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah.
Hi, this is Lorraine. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm sorry I don't have a camera tonight, but I just wanted to thank you, Jason, because this is my first XPT experience, and listening to your prototype practice was so helpful, because just like Wade was saying, you develop an idea and you think, oh yeah, this is it. And then when I, do a rehearsal, it is not it. And oh my God. And I'm like, what is happening? But then, okay, so you rally, right? And hearing you, talk about your experience and your process has just been so helpful to me. If you don't mind a question, you mentioned that you were doing some 3D printing.
Mm-hmm.
And I wondered if you are doing the printing there at the center, if you're sending it out, and if you're sending it out, can you share who you work with for that?
We got a donation to get a printer here, so I've been doing it all here with our printer, which again happened right during lockdown. So I was able to learn how to print when we weren't producing shows. Yeah.
I've been working with a 3D sculpting program. It used to be called, I think, Sculptress, which you probably are familiar with, but they've now changed it to ZBrush, and I'm trying to understand how to develop it into, to get a pricing for 3D heads. So that's why I asked the question. I have this dream that is going to be affordable and easy, haha, that kind of thing.
There are some places online where they like, if you have a model, you can just upload it and they'll give you a price like that.
Oh yeah, yeah, I have one, but I just wondered if there was something that you were having success with. It's all good.
ZBrush is way over my head. I use Blender because it's easier.
Oh yeah, okay. Well, I'm just learning it now. Maybe next year I'll be an expert and can help you, everybody. Yeah, knock on wood. So, thanks though.
Lorraine, have you heard of Thingiverse?
What's it called?
It's called Thingiverse. It's a depository online of 3D models for printing. And a lot of them have Creative Commons licenses.
Cool. Okay, I'll look into it.
Yeah. Thingiverse.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, you can search. They have like ball jointed doll parts that you can print and all sorts of wacky stuff. Yeah. So you can find, there's some that are like, oh, you can only use this for a non-commercial use, and some that are commercial usable as long as you attribute the model.
Okay. I love to Frankensteinify something. So,
Yes.
and I'm Jason, I just have to tell, I'm a huge Tesla fan and Edison. So I don't care if you're accurate or not. I'm looking forward to this artistic translation, because it just kind of moves the story forward. No, if anybody was in the room back then, I mean, okay, good for you. But now we have the history. So
Yeah.
I think that there's license there to go whatever way, I saw you posted that coil when you got it working. I just happened to see it on, I guess, Instagram or somewhere, and man, it looks great. I just wanted to commend you on that, because any true Tesla fan is going to expect that.
Absolutely.
And I think it's great that you're going to provide that. Yep, absolutely.
Like I said, as soon as we got the go ahead, I was like, that's the first thing I started building while I was doing research.
It's amazing.
Yes, there has to be a Tesla coil. Okay.
Yeah,
and
you have to
maybe
have
we'll
that.
have puppets.
Well, maybe people's hair, maybe you could have that thing that makes the hair go up, and that could be the puppets right there.
I have one other question, Jason. I was just really
Sure.
curious. So the mechanism of those legs is so intricate, and it blows me away. But I had this whole thing that I get into with puppets when I project all this stuff onto them.
Mhm.
And it's like, I felt like that mechanism and some of the mechanisms of the puppets really embodied the way these men thought, that the way things move. And I mean, that's what they thought about everything. And I wondered if the design, that sort of transparency of design that I layered all that sort of meaning onto, was there anything like that going on in your head when you did that?
Oh, absolutely. And
Okay.
one of the next steps is actually to develop that further, because when I was first building those, they were just supposed to be generic mock-ups, and now I'm like, how can I make Edison look more like an Edison invention? How can I make Tesla look more
Oh my
like a
God.
Tesla
Yes.
invention? And yeah.
Can you explain or show us what you're talking about?
Oh man.
Do you have those legs
Or
nearby?
show us illustration. or
No.
No.
Can I screen share?
Yeah, totally.
Let's see if I can pull stuff up here.
Thank you.
I'm really overjoyed to know that that's not going to go away and be covered up by, and that it was just a way to make the puppet do a thing, but it was also about that person. I really love that, because when you're seeing models and mock-ups, you never know.
Am I doing it?
Yep,
You're doing
I'm
it.
sorry, I haven't done Zoom in a while. So
that's all right.
Yeah, these are the
Mercifully.
legs we're talking about.
Oh, I see the Edison coil.
Are you seeing the video play?
No, I just see the photos.
Get out of this then. Do this differently. Ooh. Okay. Now you're seeing a big leg? No, just a bunch of little pictures.
Just little pictures, yeah. Not
Okay.
the large one yet.
Well, let me see if I can just make these bigger. Okay. There's a Tesla coil, lightning bolts. That's the pigeon. These are the legs we were talking about.
Mhm.
And they're basically the same way I do smaller marionette legs, but I knew that was going to be way too heavy. So I cut all of these holes in it to lighten it up, and it looked really cool. And this was actually in the middle. You can see that's the first version of this, which was cardboard, just to test it out and see if it worked. So, I mean, everything started with cardboard.
So let's go back to that, because you just said that you knew that the leg was going to be too heavy, so you started making cutouts. So you didn't necessarily originally intend it to look as mechanical as it did. It works as kind of being a mechanical representation of a human leg.
Yeah.
But originally it was just to make it lighter.
I mean, yeah, that was one of the big reasons. One
Wow.
of the things that still doesn't work, and I really liked how it worked. I mean, I did make aesthetic choices when I was
Of
making
course, of
models,
course.
but
Yeah, yeah.
one of the things that doesn't work is that it's really cool in profile, but when you're looking straight at it, all you see is like a little skinny line. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out how to flesh it out and make it interesting for both sides. This is the head mechanism. I don't really know if you can see it. It's probably pretty small, but instead of just going up and down, there's actually two controls, so you can toggle it and it tilts from side to side.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of these are just like all the little puppets. Like I said, I knew that I needed a lot of them. I didn't even know who these little puppets were going to be when we got into the workshop. I just made 4 generic puppets, and I had some vague ideas, but they, developed into different characters.
Looking at these pictures, I want to ask a question. When do you make the decision on whether or not when a puppet speaks that their mouth moves or not?
That's always a thing
Mhm.
to think about. I guess a big part of it is what's important in the scene. For me, for this piece, I really thought, again, as I was building those mechanisms, I was really thinking about making the mechanics of it, and I realized that that's what the puppet was doing, and that's also a big part of what the puppets would be doing in the show, is working on their different inventions. So for me, it was more important to get those poses of looking and thinking more than just moving their mouth, because they couldn't do it. They couldn't do both.
So you're having to choose between one or the other.
Yeah. I've actually been thinking a lot about eye blinks in them, but I don't know if that's going to fit either. And there's also one of the things that was a big experiment with these is that these puppets are pretty complicated to perform. If we hadn't had this workshop time to just experiment, I don't think we would try to do a show here at the center with puppets this complicated.
Huh.
Because it eats up a lot of rehearsal time. Just figuring out just the very basics of like, how do I take a step?
Right.
So yeah, if I hadn't had that built-in buffer of like a few weeks of just figuring out how to make these work, I don't think we would have done anything this complicated.
And one more question too. After looking at those photos and remembering some of the things I saw, obviously you're going to still be working on the puppets and making them more full, I guess.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I remember thinking while I was watching that rehearsal that there was something interesting about seeing all the puppets kind of bare, and it being about these 2 scientists who were tinkerers themselves, and watching you guys kind of build up and tinker with these puppets as you're using them on the stage. Are you afraid, or what is the balance between how clothed you're going to have those puppets with, and still having them slightly exposed to show that kind of mechanism of what you built?
That's the next step of the
That's
design
this next
process.
step.
That's exactly what I've been thinking about.
Right.
Also, there's like the whole question, people probably know the buzz phrase of the uncanny valley.
Mhm.
I mean, that's kind of what I was going for. I kind of wanted them to be human enough to be creepy.
Yep.
But I definitely want them to be able to still come apart. One of the things that was another big experiment was, it always has bothered me when you don't have enough puppeteers to operate a puppet and you just leave an arm dangling. That's always bothers me. So I wanted to see if it was possible to just get rid of that arm when we weren't using it.
Mm.
And I think that was, successful experiment. But if we put too much of a costume and make it look too human, is that going to be really disturbing for that arm to disappear?
Mhm. Yeah. Does anyone else have any questions? I don't want to take everyone's time up. No?
Sorry, I got knocked off there for a second. I don't know what
No.
happened.
Yeah.
No, I don't, but I can't thank you enough. Jason, it was very kind of you to come and talk tonight, and it was
No
just so
problem.
helpful for me. And I think that look from the nods, that looks like other people too. Thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. And good luck, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I did 3 XPTs way back in the day, and I can just say from my experience, there's no way to do XPT wrong.
That's a good mantra. I'm going to write that one down.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Thanks, Wade.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you
Wade.
guys.
I think you
Great.
can keep it. Thanks.
Great. Awesome. Thanks, James. I really, really appreciate your time.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks for doing it. Have a good one.